All right. So I know not everybody was able to get a Fiano. Was anyone able to get a Fiano? All right. Good.
Yep.
Excellent. I see
Yep.
it. That's an encouraging sign. Um, I like hearing that. I like seeing that. You know, it is infinitely frustrating that I had to go pretty far to get a Fiano because I didn't want to use my 2004 Fiano. I am very excited about that bottle, but I'm not going to drink it right now. So I am excited that people were able to source it because it is really a fantastic grape. I know some of you I have turned on to this grape. I think that the thing about Fiano is that once you have it, you always want it. So it is really a special grape in that way. So Fiano really is one of Italy's greatest white wines. There is no doubt about it. And it is widely acknowledged there that it's one of their best. It is a small, thick-skinned grape. It produces very little juice and very low yields. And that is a big reason why it fell out of favor for a long time, because if you recall, given some of Italy's issues, they were all about, and France did this too, and so did Spain. I mean, they were all about quantity over quality. So some of these very high quality grapes wound up suffering for that, because when you don't have a grape that is a big producer and you're getting, the incentive is really to make sure that everything is high quantity, you're not going to be able to keep this production of this grape for very long. Okay. So that's kind of the challenge for the grape. But it has, along with the thick skins, you get a little bit of phenolics and you have really great pulp. The flavors of the grape are really excellent. And the skins are also going to give a little bit of oomph to this. It is a very versatile grape also. You can make sparkling wine out of it and it's really delicious. Although I do have to say Greco is really, I think, the preferred grape for sparkling. I think it makes excellent sparkling wine. And it can make these ageable reservas. Again, if you've listened to the show or seen any of the notes that I've put out there, I had one from 1993. It was still delicious. These wines have great longevity and ageability, and that is another thing that's sort of been neglected in the press. So generally speaking, what happens is you pick the grapes and you vinify them, and your goal is to preserve the floral freshness of the grape. So in order to do that, you're going to vinify it in stainless steel. You might move it later into barrel for the reservas, which have to be aged for 1 year. They don't have to be, excuse me, they don't have to be aged for 1 year in oak, but some people do choose to do that, okay? But the goal of Fiano is always to have this savory quality. So although there's fruit and other things, there could be spice, there could be minerals, you want savoriness, this kind of herbalness, or floral aromatics, and nuts and roasted nuts is a big one. Chestnuts or hazelnut is a really big one. And when we taste it, we will talk about it. Fiano really is the grape of Campania. In Italy, 65% of Fiano is grown in the Campania region, most of it in Irpinia, which I will show you a map of in a second when we get into it. About 16% of Fiano plantings are in Sicily, and then another 15 in Puglia, which again, I commented on in the podcast, is very, very much closer than I thought. I thought there was a higher mountain range to get over to Puglia, but it's really right there. So it makes sense that the grape would grow in Puglia. And there's a little bit in Molise also. It is also in Australia. Now, as I was talking to some of the producers there, this is a fantastic thing for the producers of Campania that Australia has taken on Fiano as a project and that it's showing some success. Because Australians, sadly, unlike some of the smaller Italian regions, have a lot more money and a lot more power to do marketing. If Australian Fiano becomes popular, then Campania will most certainly get a boost from that. And that is good things all around. So some of the ideas that I talked about with Antonio Cabaldo, who's so dynamic, and I was like, why don't you have a Fiano symposium or something, so that Australians can kind of see what's going on and vice versa, because it's really a great way to raise the profile of this grape. There's a little bit in Argentina, of course. In the US, there's a little bit of everything. So there's a little bit of Fiano in the US also. Texas is growing some, blah, 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 a little bit here and there. Irpinia. I want to show you the map of Irpinia. Really, you know, when we talk about, oops, wrong thing, sorry. When you talk about Irpinia, that's when we talk about Campania, we're really talking about Irpinia. Here's a picture of ripe Fiano, very beautiful grapes. Nice loose bunches, but not many of them, right? Not prolific. So when we look at Irpinia, this is this is a great map. This is from the Consortio of Irpinia. So this is Campania and Naples and the Amalfi Coasters here and Salento and all of that, you know, or Sorrento is there. Sorry, Salento is somewhere else. So we've got that. And then as we get closer, we get into the province of Avellino, which is over here. Okay, so you have other provinces around, but Avellino is really what we're talking about within, you know, kind of Irpinia. Irpinia is the larger area, and this is a part of it. And this map is a detailed map of Fiano d'Avellino DOCG in green, Greco di Tufo DOCG, and Tarazi. Surprisingly, Greco di Tufo is produces Fiano by a mile, even though the grapes, the sourcing area for Fiano is a lot bigger, and there's definite reasons for that. So just to talk about Irpinia for a second, right? This big chunk here, it's about 48 kilometers or 30 miles northeast of Naples. It's in the Apennine hills or mountains. You have Aglianico of Tarazi, of Greco di Tufo, and then you have Fiano. Those are the three main grapes, and there's a little bit of Falanghina and some other stuff, but really those are the three main grapes. The regional capital is Avellino, which is right here. And really, if you look at where Irpinia is, it's kind of divided in half. You have part of it that is closer to here's Irpinia, right? The part Tarazi, this part is closer to the Tyrrhenian Sea. That is much better for viticulture than the stuff on the other side. That's why there's no DOCGs on the other side of Irpinia. Most of them are in the western portion. So it's mountainous, very high elevation, well-drained soils, nice temperature diurnals here, especially in Fiano, or in the Fiano d'Avellino DOCG delimited area. The production is actually partially in a national park. So part of the reason why it's so forested and things like that is that it's in a regional park, which means that some of that land is protected and preserved. Irpinia also includes a plain of Sereno plus the hilly part, and the altitudes go up quite high. We'll talk about that in a second. There's the Partenio mountain chain in the west, and then in the east, you have the Terminio Toro Mountains, which actually when we were there, Antonio Cabaldo said that when they were younger, no more, but there used to be skiing there. So he said it was horrible skiing, but there used to be skiing there because it does rain, it does snow quite a bit in Irpinia, and sometimes there was enough to make it possible to have a ski resort there, but they don't do that anymore. The vineyards, if you look at I have a picture of this. I mean, if we look at, we'll talk about the Roman history in a second. If you look at the vineyards here, especially in this, you know, they're tucked in among a lot of other things. This is all vineyards, but here, this is much more typical in the lower right-hand corner, where you see that there are vineyards and then there are trees and groves and there's herbs and there's all sorts of other things that are going on. You don't generally just have vines. That's not really the way, and that's partially because, again, there's forest and mountains and things like that. Irpinia has a very long history of making wine, especially Fiano. So Roman wine historians think that Fiano was the main grape in the Appianum, which is one of the famous wines of Rome. It is a classical vine. That's what it's considered by the Italian wine experts, because likely it was cultivated by the Greeks and the Romans. It may have even been here and domesticated. So Appianum, it was named so because the grape was Vitis appiana. And the reason that it was called that, it was named after the bees. It's so sweet when it is ripe that the bees buzz all around and they're very attracted to the nectar of the grapes. And even today, actually, if you look, even you can see Appianum on some labels. Some people use that old "you're allowed," permitted by the DOCG in Avellino, in Fiano. So the wine was also very well known in the Middle Ages. Charles d'Anjou, who was the king of Naples, loved it, served it at the royal court. So Fiano was popular back then. And then if we fast forward in the 1920s, this grape and others from Irpinia were sent north to feed the appetites of the northern folks on the wine railway. So the producers would create, big amounts of wine, and it would be shipped up. Some of it was red to beef up some of the weaker blends of Chianti and of Piedmont, but some of the whites were also used to add flavor. So it wasn't just the reds alone. Phylloxera came, there were earthquakes. It's a very volatile area, lots of tectonics moving here, a war, right, or two. There are two wars, right? This area was destroyed, economic depression, and then you had a lot of people moving out. So in the 19th century, it started, and in the 20th century, it got worse, but people started moving out because there was no economic opportunity here, and you also had these natural disasters and phylloxera and everything else. So you had significant declines in the population here. Irpinia, in particular, is a very sparsely populated area for this reason, because they lost a lot of population. While this was going on, they also decided that for those who were going to stay and do viticulture, that since Fiano and since Greco and since Aglianico are not big and productive grapes, that perhaps they should plant things like Trebbiano Toscano and Sangiovese, because they were better growers. And if you're trying to do quantity, that's the way to do it. But like everything in Italy, of course, there's an exception to the rule, because there really aren't any rules. There's just suggestions. So the rules or the suggestions were that, they take out all of these grapes. But meanwhile, there was sort of this gentleman's agreement between grape growers and the wineries that said, we will continue with Fiano, with Greco, and with Aglianico, and you will pay us above market. And they decided to continue it because locally this was something that they really liked. So it all was not lost. But then in the 1970s and 80s, there was a huge crisis. There really was no financial opportunities in this region. And then this culminated really at the end of the 70s in 1980 with a giant earthquake, which again drove more people out. There was a lot of death, lots of homes destroyed, things like that. And that is when these new producers actually started to come back. So a lot of them had roots in Campania. Some of them owned family land. And that's where you see people start to reinvest. And the biggest reinvestor was the Capaldo family, Antonio Capaldo from Feodi di San Gregorio, who is now the largest winery in the whole region. So they helped drive investment. They brought others. Mastro Borodino was already there, had been there since the 1920s. So you have a lot of excitement. And then after the 1990s, this new generation really burst onto the scene and started a revitalization. And the revitalization was with grapes like Fiano. So as we look at what is here, this area, especially in Avellino, I'll focus in on Avellino, where this picture, these two pictures are in Avellino in the right hand side, and 51% of what is in Avellino is between 300 and 500 meters. So that's 984 feet to 1,640 feet. 23% is between 500 and 700 meters, 1,640 feet to 2,296 feet. 15% is 700 to 1,000 meters. That is 2,300 to 3,280 feet. And only 7% is between 770 feet and 984 feet. Everything here is at elevation. 40% of the slopes are at least at 20 to 35% grade. So you don't have flat land here. The minimum slope is 5%. that is really, really saying something about the way that things go. Also, exposures in all different directions. So the opportunities for how Fiano can express itself, and actually all the other grapes of this region for that matter, but the opportunities are really quite different. And then you have the soil types, focusing and really on Fiano and Avellino. We'll go back to that map now, because I think that that's really, you know, just to look at where we are talking about specifically is, oops, sorry, can't get out, got to get out of this. So if we talk about Fiano specifically, or Avellino specifically, you will see here that in this area, you have mainly calcareous and calcareous marl, which is quite good for grapes. Mostly volcanic and alluvial. Of course, it's really colluvial because it's coming from, well, some of it is coming from the streams that run all through here, but some of it is coming from the mountains. The soils are deep and they are finely textured. You've got volcanoes. You have Vulture in the south in Basilicata. You have Vesuvius, which is over near Napoli. You also have Caserta. So all of those are volcanic. And over the centuries, you have accumulation of different ash and a soil called lapilli, tufa, which is volcanic soil, minerals, very loose soil layers, very well drained. The grapes have to dig very, very deep down to get the nutrients that they need. Really creates excellent flavor. But the one thing that I will say is that this entire region, Tufo, right? That's a town here, but it also represents some of the soil types here. You have a lot of pre-phylloxera vines. These are survivors because in volcanic sandy soils, in some of these areas, you're not going to have any opportunity for phylloxera to live and thrive. So you have these centuries old vines. Most are in Tarazi, most are the Aglianico, but some are Fiano and some are Greco. So it's pretty amazing. Just to give an example, because of all of this differentiation, you might have a wine that's made in Lapio. This section here is both Tarazi and Fiano di Avellino. Okay, so Lapio right here, you might have really full-bodied, minerally wines from Lapio. And then you might move over to Sumante. Sumante is here. Sumante is known for very rich wines with very full fruit. Okay, so that's kind of this area. And then you might move to Avellino and the areas around Avellino. Those wines are known for the smoky hazelnut character that is very, very coveted. So those wines are a little bit fatter, a little richer. Even within these three areas of Avellino, you're going to find different expressions of Fiano. And the climate here is not, as many wine writers say, Mediterranean. It's really much more semi-continental. I mean, what Mediterranean climate do you know where they're getting like a lot of snow and over 180 days of rain? I don't really know any Mediterranean climates like that. Most Mediterranean climates are very dry and they're very hot. The way that this works is that you have very cold winters and you have some Mediterranean influence. Of course, you have some of that Tyrrhenian sea breeze coming in, but you are in the middle of the mountains. So even though we are fairly far south, this is an opportunity to get grapes very ripe with a ton of flavor. So the Fiano is going to get ripe and it's going to have a nice long growing season because at night in these mountainous areas, you're going to get cold weather. The diurnal temperature swings are strong, plus there's a sea breeze coming in from the Tyrrhenian, especially in the afternoon. They have over 150 days of rainfall. I think I mentioned this in the show. I mean, it is cooler here on many days and in many parts of the year than it is in Piedmont. And it's certainly rainier and they certainly have fewer problems with the climate change. They have not seen much of that. Harvest here is also quite late. It's at the end of September or beginning of October. Who would think that a white wine grape would be harvested that late? So all of these things really lead to the fact that this is a very unique area and Fiano is a very unique grape. There is also not a whole lot of it. There's only about 1,072 acres or 434 hectares. That was in 2019. It's growing a little bit more. I don't have more recent numbers than that. 185,000 cases. So we don't have a whole lot of wine being made from Fiano. It's not a high production area. Now, could they make more if the demand was higher? Yes, they could. And hopefully that will happen. But right now, it's a pretty small production thing. So if you are drinking it, be happy because you're drinking one of few bottles, right? There isn't that much out there. Hence why it's a little more expensive. It's rare, it's precious, right? As people like to say. So Fiano Diabolino is almost always 100% Fiano. It should be 100% Fiano, but the law stipulates that it only has to be 85%, and 15% can be the local grape Coda di Volpe, which is a lovely grape and has some of similar characteristics, just maybe a little bit more acidity. It can also have Trebbiano Toscano. You want to stay away from those grapes because you know how I feel about that. You can also add Greco di Tufo, which is a lovely blend too, just a very different grape from Fiano. Most of the local winemakers are doing 100% Fiano. They're honoring the tradition. Fiano Reserva has to be aged for a year, as I mentioned. Not in oak, but most of them do age it in oak. Most of it's neutral oak. They're not looking, the last thing you want to do with Fiano is take away from the aromatics that you get in the vineyard. The producers of Fiano, the serious ones, are most serious about the vineyards, right? They have studied the soils and they know that, like I said, on those various different parts, and there are lots of parts that in this map that where they're growing Fiano. The thing that I'd like to impress upon you is, though, that most of this DOCG is not grapevines, right? So when you look at New World regions, all you see are grapevines. That's not what you see here. So again, just to, oh, that was my Roman slide, but here, I mean, this is what I saw. These are all pictures I took. Okay, so in the lower left-hand corner, that's what I saw. I got stuck behind a flock of sheep, right? And, you know, this is forest. There's trees in the vineyards. There's everything. So that is not completely covered. And that means that, again, there's more room for a little bit more development, but also that each of these areas, depending on where you are sourcing from, is going to have different flavors in the Fiano. So if you have Fiano, let's taste it. I know most of you have had it before, but it tends to be a golden color. Okay, it is not a light color. People that call it the Pinot Grigio of the South, I've seen that in some articles. I don't know what they're talking about. I also don't really understand when the producers say that it's more like Chardonnay or Burgundy. Although it is, I think that this is a very Riesling-like grape. They think Greco is more like Riesling and that Fiano is more like Burgundy. And yes, it does have body, but I think that it really shares a lot of the characteristics. I will tell you that as it ages, it tastes just like aged Riesling, way more than aged Greco. Okay, so dark color because of those thick skins, you're going to get some, you know, color in there. Take a sniff. So mine is a little more herbal. I am assuming that this is from some of the cooler soils. I don't have a producer that I visited. I have a producer that I got, I Favati. And this is, it's a little bit green apple-y, so it's more on that minerally side. So I would assume that it is growing in the eastern portion with more minerally soils. Take a sip, notice the acidity and also how it fills out your mouth and of course the flavors. One's nice and flinty, like, you know, rubbing two rocks together. Very, very lovely, right? Linda reminds you of a Riesling. I absolutely agree with that, right? This is where I kept saying to the producers, I don't know why you're saying like this tastes like a Burgundy. I think it's got so many Riesling notes to it because it has this mouth-filling note to it without, you know, there's no oak. It's a very pure flavor, right? So really nice. Let me see. Marietta and Steve, Barbersville, delicious. Donna Chiara. So I went to Donna Chiara. I have to tell you, if you like that, that is the worst wine I had. It's not bad, but it is the worst wine that I had in my entire travels. So if it's that good, and that's the worst example, you can imagine how much better this wine can be. Donna Chiara is very good wine, but the best wines are even more like they'll blow you away, right? Just absolutely. Collio de la Pile, really nice, less expensive of 2 bottles. Barbersville, I know Barbersville, I'm glad that that project panned out. I remember talking to Luca about that a few years ago, and it's a perfect place for Fiano, Barbersville. So hopefully that will be something that they'll do on a longer term. Greco di Tufa from Masha Borodino, excellent. Although I, of course, prefer the Fiano because I'm a Fiano head. Lapio from Adam. How does Greco compare to Fiano? Well, we'll talk about that in a second. DeMeo, Linda, very lucky. He's coming on the program. Fennel, absolutely waxy, soft, right? Really, really lovely. Semillon, I totally get that, Mark. Bright, nice acidity green apple. Yep, really like it. Mouth-filling. To me, this wine is, I always tell people, if you have a friend or you know somebody who does not like white wine, this would be a nice introduction for them because it has qualities of a red wine, even though, again, the producers say that Greco is more like a red wine. I think the body of this wine is incredibly red. Now, the flavors are more white, but really, really quite lovely. Yeah, Louisa, you've got time to get the DeMeo. They actually just changed. So I asked them because they have changed the bottle. The old bottle of DeMeo was in a Bordeaux style bottle and it had a big F on it. But they have now, starting from, I think, the 2019 vintage on, they have the more traditional label, which I posted in the thing for this class. So really lovely. Does anyone have any questions besides the question about Greco, which I will answer? Feel free to unmute your mics. Okay.
Yeah, Elizabeth, sorry, it's Andrew here. Just I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I'm on. There we go. I think I might be on video or not video. I don't know. Anyway, just a question about the soil types. You sort of mentioned the calcareous and the structures around that. I was just interested in the level, because I had thought it was clay and limestone as opposed to calcareous, and I just wanted to sort of get your views on that and whether there's a level of mixture that comes through on that at all.
Well, calcareous is limestone.
Right. So, okay, fine.
Right.
Perfect.
So there's some of that, but they don't have a whole lot of clay. In Tarazi, they have more clay, but in the Fiano growing areas, it's much less clay because otherwise you get really dense wines. It's a little bit more volcanic. Now, the thing about this is that it's a layered soil type. So the clay, like I said, you're going to find the clay farther inland, and that is what gives some of the Tarazis some of that spicy character and a little bit more depth. But in the white wine regions, you have more of that volcanic blow, which makes a lot more makes sense when you look at where they are vis-a-vis Vesuvius, right? Because it seems strange. Vesuvius is, 30 kilometers away. It's not that far when you consider from 79 AD how big that explosion was and how it blew inland, right? All of that ash came and settled. But that's not the only time Vesuvius blew, right? I mean, it blew many, many times before 79 AD, as did Volturre, which is now an extinct volcano. Vesuvius is not extinct, by the way, lest we forget. It is still considered to be an active volcano. So as we get farther inland, there is more clay, but on the outside, yes, calcareous is limestone. So you do have some uplift from old seabed, yes, and that's how you're getting the acidity here. But for the most part, the better sites for all of these grapes, including Tarazi, have some extent of volcanic soil. That's the key to this area and why nothing can rival this and nothing will ever be able to taste like this. Even Basilicata, which has really great wines, doesn't taste anything like a Tarazi. So it's somehow the combination of all of the elements together that only this specific area has. But yes, you're not wrong about that. It's just the clay portions are much lower in Avellino.
Fantastic, thanks.
Of course. So friends, Greco. Greco, in my opinion, Greco, as I said, much smaller geographical area, but many more vines and many more bottles. Greco has been hyped to the hilt by the wine press. Okay, I'm not sure why. I don't know why. Greco reminds me of Chablis. Greco is an excellent wine. It is much lighter in style. It has many less, it's much kind of more minerally. It's got higher acidity for sure. And it expresses itself really as a really kind of a more of a kind of seafood wine. I mean, it's much lighter in my estimation. I have had now, thank goodness that I went there, I've had Grecos of all ages, right? I've had young Greco to quite old Greco. And I can tell you that for me, I think that even though producers say that it's like red wine, as I said before, I don't get that at all. I think it is very much a white wine. I think it is incredibly minerally. It definitely shows its volcanic edge to it. It can taste a little, almost a little smoky. Also, Fiano has that too, but the backdrop of fruit is different. It really does not have, it has many more citrus fruits if it's going to have that at all. And really, when I think about Greco, I think about really just, this analog to Chablis or to Albarino or things like that. Fiano is in a completely different class. Fiano to me is something that is much more, bright, I'm sorry, much more heavy and round and something that has a lot more depth to it in many ways. That does not mean that Greco is a bad wine. It just means that Fiano is a lot richer. Any other questions about this beautiful wine?
So sorry, Elizabeth, I'm one-handed today, so I can't type.
Why?
So I had surgery.
Oh my gosh, are you okay?
Yeah, I'm not supposed to be drinking, but hey, my wine guy said it's therapeutic, so I'm not on any heavy drugs, so it's just for swelling. Anyways, so it sounds like what you're saying to me is Fiano is a bigger bodied wine. You mentioned Albarino, which is pretty light. So Fiano is a little heavier, a little more dense, a little more, you have similar fruity flavors like a Sauvignon Blanc, maybe closer to a Greco.
Right.
This is closer to, I say Chardish, Chard Riesling-ish. So, okay. Thank you. That's why I asked the question.
I definitely agree with that. I think that they're better analog. Like if they were to say, every Greco to me reminds me a little bit of Chablis. So it's still a great wine of the world, but I think that they really are thinking maybe this could be Burgundy-like. It's just that I don't really know Burgundies. I guess there are some Burgundies that have that hazelnut flavor. It's just that the component that's missing in Fiano, which is great, right? Because this is just part of the grape, is that it doesn't have oak. So you don't taste oak on any of these wines ever. And in some Chardonnay and Burgundy, there's intentional oak there. It's not heavy, but it's intentional. And I think that that's where Fiano shows purity in a very different way. You know what I'm saying?
By the way, kudos to Don Chiara, because the back of their label listed grape type, where it's grown, how it's trellised, the soil that it was in, all these great facts that I wish every winery would list, right? And that's why I got the chalky clays that said that was one of the soil types it actually explicitly called out.
Right. They have more clay in their soil. I was there, right? They have a little bit more clay in their soil, but they are a good producer, don't get me wrong, but they are going for a very modern commercial angle. And so they are willing to do things that other people are not willing to do in order to get market share, which I did not like. I'm just going to say that. They are one of the producers. I'll write about it on Patreon, but they're just one of the producers that they had a fire in their tasting room and stuff like that. So I know that they were like, it was really nice of them to accommodate me. So I don't want to crap on them because they do make good wine. In fact, I'd say it's really hard to make bad wine in Campania, in Irpinia, because the soil types are so giving and you're not doing much in the winery. I will say that, except with Tarazi. It's easy to mess up Tarazi. Although I have to say I didn't have any bad Tarazi when I was there. None of the wines that I tasted from Donna Chiara were bad, okay? I'm just saying that there's better out there. I do like what they're doing with all of that information, but I also think, who is a Feoti di San Gregorio? Was it Carrie that said that she had one, Carrie? Somebody said they had a Feoti.
No,
Lisa.
somebody had.
Looks like it was Lisa.
Lisa. On the back of the Feodi, I also think that he has some of that information.
He
I'm
had some, he said mineral rich volcanic soil, which I totally am
Right.
loving about this wine.
Right. So Feodi owns, so listen to that difference, right? So Donna Chiara, which I'm saying is maybe a little bit less good than Feodi, has clay in their soils, which is usually better for red wines, some whites, but reds. And then you see in Antonio, in Feodi and in Mastroberardino, they're going to have much more volcanic and calcareous soils, right? So there, that's what you want to look for, I think. It's not to say that Donna Chiara doesn't make great wine, because they do, like I said. But if you want that next level up, where Lisa's probably tasting that, I mean, I remember I was just there, right? Flintiness and the minerality and hazelnuts and all of that, you know, the rich body plus the acidity, all this complexity coming out. And you definitely know that this wine was grown on volcanic soil, then look for that, because that's what you'll taste over and over again. And the other thing that I would say is that the over and over again, right? You're going to see that these wines are slightly different because of these changes in the soil type. Greco, because it's a smaller area, I think is often a little more like, it tastes pretty much the same wherever it goes. Although again, you know, Fiano can change depending on where you grow it. But I think you know, you've got to look stylistically at who's doing what and what you like. And Lisa said, first bottle of Donna Chiara I bought, I got a video email. Yeah, I mean, she's really, it's a woman, right? She's pretty serious about getting their name out there. Okay, the thing that I didn't like about Donna Chiara, I will just say it now, is that, and I think I said it in the podcast, I might have said it in the Hangout, is that, you know, traditionally and forever, better wines, better white wines never come in clear bottles, ever. Okay, they always come in darker bottles, and especially ones that are meant for aging. And so I heard that there are some producers who are trying to turn Fiano into Pinot Grigio of the South. So they're asking some of the producers to put Fiano in a clear bottle, which most of them are saying, hell no. And if you ask me again, you're going to get fired. So given that, I think that the fact that Donna Chiara decided to do that really bothers me, right? They put their Greco and their Fiano in clear bottles, which is sending a message that, you know, they're willing to sell themselves and sort of degrade or debase the image of Fiano and Greco to sell a couple of bottles, because people say, well, it's an Italian white and I see it's in this clear bottle and I'll buy it. And I think that that's not a great strategy. So again, that's kind of my beef with them, but that doesn't mean that they're not good wine. It is good wine. There's just different wine to be had, I would say. And I think Lisa is proving that. I don't know, I should have looked at what the soil types are here, but this wine is definitely grown on volcanic soil, because I can taste that. It's just a kind of twanginess about it. You can really, really taste that in the soil types. Many of you took the volcanic wines class, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Every wine after wine after wine, there was this weird similarity where you just are like, yep, that's what this is. That's what this is. So the volcanic wines definitely have that quality. You'll find it in the Tarazi and you'll find it in the Greco also. Just a really fascinating area.
I was trying to remember what you had said about the clear bottles in the Hangout, because I did notice that with this Donna. I got the same one.
Yeah, Donna Chiara. Yep. Yeah. And you know, again, they're so eager to get out there and be modern. I love that. I just love that. It makes me happy to see that. You know, because Mastroberardino and Feodi di San Gregorio can't be the only ones out there. So it's good that Donna Chiara, which is a relatively young winery, I mean, they started in the 90s. It's good to see them out there. It's good to see that they've got distribution in Total Wine. That's all good. It's all positive stuff but it's got to be done in the right way. And so that is my concern, is that you don't want to, you know, what Chablis have you ever seen, or Burgundy, in a freaking clear bottle? You ask a producer in Burgundy to put their wine in a clear bottle, they will tell you to pound sand. Nobody's doing that. So I think they've got to hold firm on this, really important. All right, Esther and Bill have the pricier Donna Chiara in the regular bottle, right? Other Fianos. Okay, so this is my other trick, is that one, I mentioned this in the podcast and I will tell you again, ask your wine shop to carry Fiano. Most of them don't know what the hell it is. Ask them for it. Ask them to bring it in. I guarantee, look, Terlato carries Feudi di San Gregorio. They're a huge company. They're everywhere. They're in all 50 states. So there's in the US. So there's no way they're not available. Mastro Borodino is distributed by a segment of Palm Bay, at least up and down the East Coast and on most of the West Coast. You are going to be able, and in places like Texas, you are going to be able to get Mastro Borodino as well. And if you can't get it and nobody wants to order it for you, although I guarantee that if you've got a good wine shop, once they taste it, they're going to be like, shoot, I want to take that in. There is, just order it. I mean, we drink so much of this wine, and I try all different producers, and it just, after being there, I now understand why I like some of them more than others. So, I seek out the volcanic style, but that's not the only style, right? This is a different style. This is a little volcanic, but I prefer Feudi di San Gregorio, Mastro Borodino, De Meo is my favorite. But a lot of people like Colli di Lapilli, and I think it's good, but it's not my favorite. So again, you just have to try these different wines and see. But, I will tell you that the ones that I sort of mentioned in the show are really very top notch. It's not to say there aren't other really good ones, but fantastic. Mary Jo, the wine guy at my local store, is hyped about trying it. Good. Our wine guy said he used to have a good Fiano, but not anymore. All right, well, he's got to get on it. Wine.com has Mastro Borodino. Again, I order mine from Saratoga because just a hint for those on the West Coast, I don't know what with the shipping it would be, but if you want to get good Italian wines, you've got to order it straight from New York. I mean, New York is the hub of where there are some importers in California, but New York has everything. So when I went crazy over that Stilema Tarazzi, I've got a bunch of New York retailers looking for the 2016 for me right now. So it doesn't hurt that I had Piero Mastro Borodino sent them a note, but still, I'm still going to get that wine because New York has it, right? Best New York retailer. I go with Saratoga Wine. My friend owns Grapes, the wine company in Westchester. Astor Wines is really great. 67 Wines is great. I mean, there's a whole bunch. Astor is, Luann, the only difference is that Astor is very expensive. Their markup versus Saratoga. That's why I order from Saratoga. And incidentally, all of the other retailers hate Saratoga, which is a very good sign for us. And the distributors, they all hate Saratoga, which means that we are getting better prices. So that's usually why I order from them. Jane, so hard to get Fiano in France. Yeah, you know what? Oh, Jana, I think that French are very protective of their own industry, as are Italians. So it's going to be really hard. You've got to find, one of these kind of enclaves that has international wines, and it's just impossible. I mean, I think in Paris, you said you're in Paris, so maybe there might be more opportunity, but you really have to track it down. It's really hard. Yeah, Greg, no shipping in summer. That's true. It's, of course, here it's 56 degrees. So like, what is that like?
Yeah, it's 80 here today, and I won't get my wine access until October.
Bummer. That is a bummer. Sorry,
Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Hi. Is
Hi.
Terradora de Paolo good in your opinion?
Yes. So funny story about Terradoro. So because it's Italy and Europe in general, the Mastro Borodino family had an enormous fight. Okay. And I don't remember whether it was brothers or cousins, but they owned all the vineyards and the brand. And they had it was some massive blowout. And Terradoro and Mastro Borodino, Terradoro separated from Mastro Borodino. The agreement was Piero Mastro Borodino got the brand and the winery, and Terradoro got all the vineyards. So Mastroberardino, because they had contracts with a lot of really good people, right? They were able to buy wines, but they had to start, I can't remember what year this happened, but they had to start from scratch. Terradoro went off on its own and had good vineyards. Now, the criticism of Terradoro is that they have amazing vineyards, but they've gotten a bit lazy about their winemaking. So their raw material is amazing, but who is running the place they're not quite as active as some of the others. So even though they definitely own some of the best vineyards, and Mastroberardino had to start from nothing, right? Basically nothing. I don't know whether I'm going to ask Piero Mastroberardino about that, because it's a little bit, I think it's a really thorny issue. It was ugly. That Mastroberardino still, I think, because they kept the recipe, or they kept whatever they kept, they managed to maintain and exceed even without the best vineyards. And Terradoro owns the best vineyards and certainly could wipe the floor with Mastroberardino if they wanted to, but they haven't made the investments necessary. That was the gossip that I got. Of course, I asked, because I like the goss. So I got it. Yeah, so that's that. I buy them, they're so affordable, but it's because of this. That's why they're affordable, because they have great raw materials, but they're just like, I don't know what they're doing. It's kind of weird, because everybody else seems to be going like upscale and hiring, different people and trying to get like excitement going. And they're just like, wah, wah. It's kind of like sad. Even like, I'm criticizing Donna Chiara, but on the same hand, they just hired like this really like young, vivacious winemaker who is making wine in Lombardy. And, it's cool. He's excited. He knows mountain viticulture, right? It does make sense that they're hiring people from Piedmont and up in the north. That's basically who they have to hire. Can't really hire, Chianti winemakers to come down into Campania. You have to understand mountain viticulture. Weird, totally weird, right? Like you walk into this place and it's like, what the hell? Like, are we in like the Alps? Are we in the Dolomites? So kind of cool. Any other questions? No? All right. So that is Fiano. I hope that you enjoy this. I think everybody seems to be liking it. And I can do another, let me know on Patreon if you want me to do one on Greco. We can do a little mini class on Greco di Tufo also. And it will be easier to find than Fiano, but we'll just see how it stacks up. And then if we want to get a little spendy, we could do Tarazi, or we could just do Aglianico. Chris, what's up?
Somebody on the chat had asked about the difference between Fiano from Sicily and from Campania. So can you address that?
I have not had any Fiano from Sicily, and I don't think it makes it out. It's really a local thing. You just don't see a lot of it, and it's often blended with other things, the same thing. So I said that 15% of Fiano is grown in Sicily, but most of it is not, it's not straight Fiano by any means. And you won't find that in Puglia either. Usually it's blended in, and often it's a component of the blend. So they're growing it and mixing it in with whatever their bigger grape is, whatever their more important grape is. And also even in Campania, most Fiano in other appellations that are not in Irpinia, with the exception of Sogno and Cilento, most of it is blended with Falanghina or Coro de Volpe, and it's on the Vesuvius side. So you will see Fiano, but it's not the main grape. And in Sicily, it's definitely not. It's just not. When you see whites of Sicily, you're seeing Insolia, Caricante in the form of Etna Bianco, and you're seeing Grillo, and you're seeing the wines of Marsala, right? The whites of Marsala. That's what you're seeing. You wouldn't normally, you're not going to see a Fiano on the shelf from Sicily, most likely. And they don't really make them either. They don't really make 100% Fiano. This is really the province only of Campania, these 100% Fiano wines, which is really unique.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. So everybody's saying yes to Greco. All right. So great. Adam, we do these quarterly. I don't know how new you are to the gang, but we do these. So with at this level, we do these at least quarterly, but I try to do them a little bit more frequently. But I think we can do a Greco one in pretty short order. I'll give you a couple weeks to get the wine, because it can be, I know these wines can be a little bit challenging to get. But let's do a Greco one in a few weeks. All right. And
Elizabeth, it's Frank. You're having the white wines of Italy in a couple of weeks, and I just got my Saratoga shipment in. How's the Greco in that order? I'm looking forward to tasting
delicious.
it. I bought 2 bottles of it actually.
Frank, just so different, right? So why don't you got your Coravin, right?
Yeah, I just
so why don't you Coravin a glass right now?
Oh, okay.
And compare it to the Fiano. You can do your own comparison.
Not chilled, but okay. Good thought.
Yeah, I think that would be really fun. And then, you can provide some insight either on the page or whatever. I mean, obviously I have my thoughts about it, and my thoughts are that Greco is Chablis or, Muscadet or one of those, and Fiano is Riesling or maybe, a Burgundy that doesn't have a lot of oak on it. That's really where I go with this. And aged Fiano is 100% aged Riesling. It's got some petrol in it. It tastes like cheese rind, right? That's what aged Riesling tastes like, cheese. So yeah, pretty exciting that, that these wines age, and they age like a Riesling. Now, you might not want to age them, and that's totally fine, but they do taste really good if you do age them. So you have that option if you wanted to try it. And it doesn't take that long. I think I had one from 2014 that was already showing that. So 9 years. So, and it sounds like a lot, but already you get a 2018 Fiano, and then you don't have that much more to go, right? You don't have that much more before you start getting those aged characteristics. Mark, regarding Australia, look, frankly, we're lucky that we get any Australian wine, let alone Fiano. No, I have not seen any Australian Fiano on the shelf. I haven't seen any Tempranillo. I've seen no Aglianico. All of that is supposed to be, the big wines. But then when we talk to Simone, right, if you go back and listen to that show with Simone about the exporting and how difficult it is for these boutique producers to export, and how hard it is for them to get a grip here, then you start to recognize there are many more. Why did I say, if you followed that, if anybody participated in that, I know a bunch of you participated in that, what region would you like to go to most? New World region? My bucket list is really Australia. Now, from a personal standpoint, I would rather go to New Zealand, but from a wine standpoint, I really want to see what's going on in Australia, because every single Australian listener that contacts me is like, what, you don't have access to this? You don't have this? You don't have that? It's like, no, I want to try that, but no, we don't have any of that. I think that Louisa and Andrew probably have a little bit better access to that stuff than we do, because of the Commonwealth status, but we don't.
Yeah, I think you're right, Elizabeth. I mean, we get a lot of us. I mean, you probably comment on this as well, but we get a lot of Australian, and I have seen Australian Fiano as well, right? So it is quite different from Avellino, but Australia it's a very common country in terms of trade and activity that's between the UK and Australia. So it's quite common. And
you're in the UK, right?
Yeah. Don't let my accent fool you.
Yeah, where are you Irish?
No, Canada.
Oh, Canada. Okay, but you have a little bit. That's hard because you don't sound Canadian at all, my friend.
So I've been in the UK for quite a long time. So
yes, I definitely can tell that. I definitely didn't, but I just couldn't place it. Now that makes more sense. So and Louisa is definitely, she's Italian from Rome. That's where she gets that British accent. Just kidding, Louisa. But I mean, do you see that too, Louisa? Much more access to Australian wines, right?
Yeah, lots of Australian. I haven't seen Australian Fiano. I have tasted Fiano from Puglia, which I got quite easily here, which was not in the same league as Campania.
No,
but it was interesting.
Different soils.
Yeah, and blended.
Oh, always blended, right? Different soils. not
Sure.
not the volcanic. So you'll get the enjoyment of the fruit without the complexity of the dirt, right? That's kind of how I would look at it. You'll get a nice soft round mouthfeel, but you won't have any of these other, like every time you take a sip, you go, what? That's kind of, wow, what's that? Like that's what the extra $10 US is going to get you, or £5 is going to get you, right? Like that will get you that stuff. So it's a pleasurable grape on its own. I sort of find that for those Virginians and people, Marylanders who, and North Carolinians like myself who go to Barboursville, that's the difference. Like their Nebbiolo is really good, but it's not Barbaresco or Barolo. You know what I mean? It's really good. It's great. It's a great expression of Virginia, and it's a great expression of the grape, but there's something missing if you compare it to Barbaresco. That's just my, and that's terroir, right? That's terroir. All right, great. So thank you all so much.
Cheers.